What I think like one of the biggest pieces of criticism that I've seen is the lack of bones, or the lack of bones that have been found. And you talked a little bit about it in your book. But can you kind of like just kind of cover like how you address that in your book? Because I think it's really interesting for people listening to hear that.
Right. Well, there's two aspects that have to be considered. The one we've kind of alluded to a little bit as we've talked about some of the behaviors and qualities of the natural history of Sasquatch, as can be inferred from the clues that are available and by extrapolation and bracketing by the anatomy and physiology of known great apes. So that being that they're a large-bodied primate, they're at the top of their food chain, they probably have a long lifespan. If we look at the life expectancy of the other large-bodied great apes and humans, we're talking about 45 to 60 years.
Yeah.
It's only been recently. Humans before, only recently with good nutrition, reliable food, and medication, our lifespan has been extended. I mean, it wasn't too long when 45 years was a ripe old age. But there's also a positive correlation of body mass and longevity. So as this creature is bigger, I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't hit 50 to 60 years, and even in the wild.
Yeah.
Under those conditions. So that's one side.
Mm-hmm.
Plus their rarity.
Yeah.
They wrap in there their rarity. And so, a death of an individual Sasquatch in a given area is a real rare event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we, because kind of bearing on that, the notion of rarity, again, I won't go through all the machinations of how I come to this. We've touched on some of the things, making comparisons to social structure, home range size inferences, and what habitat they seem to be correlated with. So take my state of Idaho. If you look at the bear distribution, the range, you look at where there's sufficiently productive habitat, and you look at how many 1,000 square mile plots could you stick in that territory. And of course, just a ballpark would be about 12 to 15. Let's just say 12, and it's going to vary with topography and with patchiness of the forest and habitat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even whether the mountain range faces east, west, or north and south is going to change the flora considerably. And then each of those plots, a dominant male, maybe 2 or 3 females, and a couple offspring. Let's just say 5. Again, keep the math simple. 12 times 5, we can all do that, 60. So in all of Idaho, there's 60 Sasquatch. There's 35,000 black bear.
Oh, wow.
So you start comparing like that. We'll say, oh, well, yeah, but your numbers, way too conservative. Okay, well, let's double it. There's 120 Sasquatch. Well, there's 240. There's still, 1,000 times more.
Yeah.
Or 100 times, a couple hundred times. Kind of the rule of thumb ends up being about 200 black bear for every Sasquatch in a state. And even when you go back east, when you use that rule of thumb I talked about black bear, you also need to keep the numbers in mind too.
Yeah.
So 35,000 in Idaho. There's about 30,000 in Washington State. About the same in Oregon and Northern California. British Columbia, 110,000 black bear.
Oh, wow.
110,000 black bear. But see, that means, so if we just take a 0 off, there's there's more. There's a couple thousand Sasquatch probably in there, but anyway, or a couple hundred. The other side of the conversation about bones has to do with the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is wet coniferous forest habitat. And often, at least in the Pacific Northwest and Intermountain, Idaho, basalt batholith, it's volcanic igneous rock, which tends to contribute to very acidic soils. So if the gnawers and chewers and and the porcupines and the squirrels and even the deer. Well, calcium is at a premium, and they'll chew on bones. If they don't make short work of it, what's exposed to the elements and the soil quickly disappears. So, there aren't many people. I was talking to someone on the phone today, actually, and he likes to look for sheds. And so he spends a lot of time off trail walking around, and he finds a lot of bones, and he has quite a little collection he wants to show me pictures of to identify. You don't find very many bones, though, out in the woods. When you think of, that's the number of bear. I don't even know what the number of estimate for deer is in Idaho, but it's in the, probably hundreds of thousands.
Right.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And so how many deer carcasses do you ever find when you're out on a hike?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
very little, and not a whole, unless you just happen upon, and it's usually a roadkill or someone is shot or left abandoned a wounded animal. Anyway, so that's the issue. Bones are just precious few. So go back to our example of Idaho. Of those, say 120 or 200 of those, let's just say 200 of those 200 Sasquatch in Idaho, how many of them are in their golden years?
Yeah.
On the verge of dying. So how frequently does a Sasquatch die? It's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest, will someone hear it? or does it make a sound? With no one to hear it, will it make a sound? If a Sasquatch dies in Idaho, there's no one to find the bones, did it really die? So that point is, what are the chances? I mean, it's a needle. It's even worse than a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. I mean, like, how often would you run into like a dead bear?
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of how many times we've seen bones out there. I mean, we've seen bones.
A deer.
Sure. We've seen a deer.
Moose before.
Yeah. But that's about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen.
Yep. To bottom of the food chain.
Yeah. What,